region. And in terms of interpreting what's going on the ground, it's very difficult to know accurately what is happening. Saif al-Islam's statements this morning really have heightened tensions and do create an atmosphere that doesn't give investors confidence.
All right, Richard, well, let's in fact listen to what Saif al-Islam had to say about the impact on the oil industry of this unrest. Let's take a listen.
Libya's oil unites us. We have one source which all 5 million Libyans benefit from. It's not in the east or in the west, it is in the middle. If we separate, who is going to run and manage these oil resources? How are we going to divide this up between us? Who is going to support our children, distribute food, provide hospitals and schools? Do you think we can split the country up? We may agree for a few months on how to divide it, but it will become a burning issue, the cause of fighting between all tribes, because the oil is in the middle and the south. That is desert, which is not inhabited.
Richard Thompson, it almost seems like it all comes down to oil. How much is Libya's oil worth and who benefits the most from it?
In Libya, pretty much the entire economy comes down to oil. Oil accounts for something like 95% of Libya's export revenues and 80% of its GDP. The question you ask about who benefits from it is the key question, of course. There are enormous oil reserves in Libya and a relatively small population. That population has had to put up with 40 years of a pretty stagnant economy through the current regime, but also through sanctions from the US and international community. They expected, since the lifting of sanctions, jobs to be created, infrastructure to be developed, education, schools, hospitals, all the rest of it, and they haven't seen any of that yet. Their expectations have not been met by reality. The main beneficiaries to people's perceptions are those at the top, the supporters of the regime, the businessmen, and it leads to a lot of frustration, as we're seeing on the ground. I think the truth is, though, that the regime is trying to attract investment, is trying to liberalise, but we're talking about changing a society and a culture that has been fixed for about 40 years. It will take a long time to do. And then overlaid on top of that, we have the split between the east and the west of the country. The Benghazians and the people in the Cyrenaica eastern half of the country feel that they have been disenfranchised and cut out of the oil wealth. And so you have a number of grievances that are now pouring out through these protests.
Okay, thank you very much for your insight. Richard Thompson, Middle East Economic Digest, from the Middle East Economic Digest, speaking to us there live from Dubai. Thank you. Well, the unrest in Libya seems to be spreading. We're now hearing reports that a government building is on fire in Tripoli, set on fire by protesters there. This is in addition to the state TV building being ransacked by protesters in Tripoli. In addition to Tripoli, the unrest also in the second largest city of Libya, where protesters are said to be in control. With me in the studio is Wahid Burshan. He's a Libyan political analyst, joins us here. He's been here with us, in fact, for several hours now. What do you make of these latest developments? Things seem to be moving quite fast. It's been, what, 4 or 5 days now that these protests began. And it seems that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that the ball now is in the protesters' camp, that they seem to have the upper hand anyway.
Absolutely. The regime have lost control, clearly have lost control for pretty much the whole country. And now what he has left in Tripoli, he's making whatever attempts, but clearly the initiative is not on his side. The protesters are making controlling the sort of like the moves and the agenda of what's happening. Clearly, the regime is looking for ways to come back, but how? Where? I mean, this can't be.
Well, Gaddafi had threatened to stop cooperating with Europe unless they stop supporting, he says, the protesters. We talked about Libya's oil exports there. Most of them are exported to Europe.
That's right.
How tough is Gaddafi's position vis-à-vis the West? I mean, does the West have any leverage at all?
I'm not sure they have leverage, but I would definitely, I would say from the other way, is that the West needs to recognize the importance of Libya and its production. And they need to come up strong against what's happening. Clearly Europe, and I hope they can be a little bit more forceful in their position with the Libyan people, siding with the Libyan people. I think once that happens, hopefully the regime or this whole thing comes to an end, and obviously the production would be then, hopefully would be in a more stable hand than this regime.
Now, Western leaders, speaking of the West a bit more,
right.
The State Department, of course, said it was very concerned. Western leaders have been very strident in their criticism of the events in Libya, but will that be as far as it goes, do you think? I mean,
yeah,
is any action likely besides criticism?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say this. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like they have taken a stand like let's say the way they did it with Egypt, for example. I think they were baffled how to deal with this. I mean, clearly the change in Libya, it changes quite a bit in terms of their
but to
Middle
what
Eastern
degree?
strategy.
I mean, to what degree is Europe and Washington really able to respond?
Not much, I must say. I mean, the leverage is a regime like this. I mean, this regime just came out from long-standing lockup, if you will, by the West. And when they came out, I mean, just for the past few years, not much ties.
The reason
were
you say
developed.
that is because Libya, unlike Egypt or Tunisia, is a new friend to the West, not
Yes,
really an old
yes.
friend.
Actually, they were under sanctions for because of the Lockerbie situation, and since the regime with the previous administration, George Bush, they surrendered the nuclear, toys, if you will. And they come out and they were a friend of the West. They tried to position as such just for them to survive a little bit longer. But clearly the Libyan people and the Arab people in general have not signed up to that, and they said enough is enough.
Let me ask you, there have been protests in Libya in the past, and
right.
all of them have been brutally quashed by the regime. Do you think it's different this time around? Do you see events playing out differently?
Absolutely. I think let's be frank about this. I mean, clearly the length of the regime had an impact, but what's happening in Tunis and Egypt have given, I guess, template of what to do and have energized the people. And what told them is that what's possible. That this can be done, and when that realization has been accomplished, I guess the people start moving.
Okay, thank you very much
You bet.
for your analysis. Wahid Borshan, Libyan political analyst and an activist here in the studio with us in Doha. Now, the events in Libya, as we mentioned, are pushing oil prices higher. In New York, crude for March delivery is up by around $1.70 a barrel. Meanwhile, the European Union foreign ministers are expected to condemn the use of force against pro-reform protesters in Libya. That's according to a draft joint statement. The ministers are meeting in the Belgian capital, Brussels. That joint statement will be considered at that meeting later this Monday. In other news, 10 disabled children have died in a fire at an orphanage in Estonia. The blaze broke out in a wooden building.